Okay, and we're recording. And with that, I will hand off to Dee for a few words.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So we are excited to be moving into phase 3 of our in-person service delivery. So I'm glad so many people are able to make it today, and then we're recording it for those who may want to watch it later. We're in some very, as you know, dynamic and changing times. So our phase 3 right now is almost identical to phase 2, a couple of slight differences, but very similar. We're still continuing to, we have to track and report out on the numbers of people we're seeing in person every week to the commissioner's office, and we just have to keep tabs on how things are going overall. So I know many of you are excited to be moving into this phase, and some of you maybe are not so excited to be moving into this phase for, everybody has their reasons. So what I think we are fortunate right now is that we have flexibility with this. So again, phase 3 in-person service delivery, it will be available for those of you who are ready to move forward with that. It certainly isn't going to be a requirement for everyone. After Labor Day, we're hoping to open up to our full array of services for everyone, including in-person services. But again, because of the dynamic changing environment, I'm less confident of that right now than I maybe was a few weeks ago. So we'll see how it goes. It could be that we would continue like in our phase 3 for longer than anticipated. But my hope is that after Labor Day and into September, we'll be able to loosen up some of our requirements and such around this, and again move into our full array of services. So we'll keep you posted as things change. So I'm excited to kick off today, and again, you're probably going to have some questions. We're open to trying to answer as many of those questions as we can about in-person service delivery. I think much of it will be covered throughout the training here. So with that, let's get started.
Thank you, Dee. All right, here we go, everybody. All right, I need to move the chat so I can see here. Okay, so our learning objectives today are to understand VRS staff and manager responsibilities. We have two separate sets of protocols, so we want to be able to follow the in-person service delivery protocol with a participant, and then likewise be able to follow the in-person service delivery protocol with a third party, like a business or an employer or a school community provider. We want to adhere to medical and data privacy requirements, and then we're also going to meet with Brenda Tuma here later in this training and receive some COVID-related safety training. So right up front, I want you to know that I realize you were not provided with a PowerPoint. You don't have materials in hand. You're probably ready to frantically take some notes. Don't worry, this will all be provided to you in this Microsoft Teams, DEED_VRS phase 1, 2, and 3 in-person appointments. You are not yet a part of this team, but you will be at the conclusion of this training. You'll be added to this team, so watch for that notification to come through. But this is our place of staff who are and managers who are already involved in phase 1 and phase 2 are already on here. This is where they're accessing the information that they need, the plan and the protocol and their PowerPoints that they learned from too. So this is where you're going to be able to access exactly what you're seeing here today. So please do take some notes, but know that it's a lot of information that's going to come at you. It's probably going to feel less like a training and more of a process. Do this, then this, then this. And it will all be here available to you on this Microsoft Teams under Files. Staff approved for in-person services. Everybody, we are at phase 3, so it's all VRS staff. And just in case you were curious who is in phase 1 and phase 2, you can see them on the slide here. But we are now today at phase 3, so it's everybody, which is very exciting. So when we say in-person appointments, we're referring to appointments with participants, and that could be at our VRS office, at a business, in the community. That could be at the high school, community providers, a retail store, any kind of public space, both indoors and outdoors. Could be job coaching at the participant's workplace. And it could also mean maybe tours or employer meetings at their business or at the school or community partner. Important notes for phase 3, just up front before we dive into the details. In-person appointments are not a requirement. They're only when it's necessary, by appointment only, and with prior supervisory approval. So it's just an option. In-person appointments, there are some limits on the number at this point of how many we can have. So again, don't worry about frantically writing this down. This information will be available to you. It's limited to 2 to 3 person appointments per day, no more than 5 days a week. So what that means, it's a maximum of 15 in-person appointments per week. And we mean in person. So we don't mean like your virtual appointments or phone calls and things like that. In-person appointments are limited to a maximum of 15 appointments per week. And meetings no longer than 8 hours. And I'm sure some of you are laughing. Why on earth would I need an 8-hour meeting? Good question. And that really is for those folks who are doing some job coaching. We know that sometimes those interactions can go a little bit longer than a typical meeting. Okay, so the next 3 slides, we're just going to go through some kind of broad and general responsibilities. And if there's something on this list that makes you go, what does that mean? Don't worry, we're going to talk about it as we continue on in the presentation. So our staff responsibilities conform to safety guidelines that are in place. And again, this is kind of those things that are in flux. So these will be communicated to you if things change. But right now, it's wearing a mask if you're not fully vaccinated. Staff who are fully vaccinated, though, can still choose to wear a mask if you would like. And then conforming to social distancing if it's required at the location that you're visiting. It's your responsibility to read and understand the plan and the protocol, which will be available in that Microsoft team that I mentioned. Follow the in-person service delivery protocol, and that's what we're about to go through today. It's your responsibility to request supervisory approval for in-person appointments, conduct health screenings on participants and any essential attendees, provide consent statement and privacy notice to participants and any essential attendees. We do track some basic screening and consent information within some of that work that you're already doing. And it's also our responsibility to protect private medical data. And again, we'll dive into the details of what all that means here in just a minute. Our participants, it's their, it's their responsibility to provide consent to in-person service delivery, participate in a health screening prior to the appointment, and conform to safety guidelines in place, including social distancing if it's required by the location and wearing a mask if it's required by the location. Managers, so if you're a manager out there watching, your responsibilities are to also read and understand the plan and the protocols, which you will as well have available to you in that Microsoft team. To coordinate and purchase personal protective equipment for your local team, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Review any in-person services requests for approval. So your staff are going to come to you and look for approval to have in-person meetings, and it's your responsibility to give that approval. And a detail that we'll go through later as well is for those approved in-person meetings with businesses, there's one extra step that you'll complete on Teams to track that information. And I'll show you how to do that as we move forward. Managers, it's your responsibility to provide guidance and answer questions that staff and participants have about in-person services, to oversee staff compliance of the protocols and safety requirements, and then to attract attendance at this training. Who on your team is here today and who on your team is going to access the recording because they couldn't be here today, and then to provide them and add them to that team on Microsoft Teams. So managers, all of you will be made owners of that team, so you can add your staff into that team where they can access all the information that they need to provide in-person services when they've completed training. Okay, here we go, guys. We're going to dive in. So those 2 different sets of protocols that we have, meeting with a participant and then kind of meeting without a participant or at a third party. And this first one that we're going to dive into is a little bit more involved. Again, it's going to seem like a lot of information to remember. This whole PowerPoint will be available to you, so you can go back and read through it again and familiarize yourself with it after this training. So we're keeping our mind in the frame of we're meeting with a participant now. So first, what we want to do is set up the appointment with a participant. And it's not as simple as just calling them and setting and putting on our calendar that we're used to. Right now, what we need to do is first determine, is an in-person appointment necessary? You can still do your virtual appointments, but are there reasons that you need to see somebody in person? And when you've made that determination, then reach out to your manager for approval. And that could be as simple as a phone call, an email, or maybe you happen to see them. Just somehow request manager approval that you want to have an in-person appointment with such and such participants and these essential attendees. Essential attendees could mean maybe there's a guardian that really needs to be there or a case manager. Again, that's dependent on the meeting and who you're seeing. When you have approval for that appointment staff, then you can arrange for that in-person appointment with the participant and any essential attendees using what's called the appointment setting protocol. And I will show you that here in a minute. And these next few bullets that you see on the slide it's essentially the information that's included on this form, the appointment setting protocol. And it includes notifying them of their requirement, the participant's requirement to participate in a COVID-19 health screening. It informs them of their need to perform a self-temperature check to prepare for a screening. It will provide them with the date of their appointment and the time of their screening call. It provides them verbal informed consent statement, and then the opportunity to answer any questions. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what is this appointment setting protocol? Well, let's take a look at it here. So again, this form, this appointment setting protocol, this will be available to you in the Microsoft Teams that I showed you before that you will have access to following this training. So essentially what this is it's a script for you. This isn't a form that you necessarily have to fill out, but you have to read this word for word. Deed Legal has vetted this, and it's important that you say this exactly as it's written. Don't paraphrase or don't skip sentences. This is what we have to read to participants when we call them to set up this in-person appointment. And I am not going to read this word for word to you today. You can see it on your screen. And actually, I'm just going to make sure, Jamie, I can see you. You can see the appointment setting protocol. Okay, thank you. You can see this right here. Staff must read the notice below. And it's going to go through, and somebody's writing on it. Look at that. That was fancy. It's going to go through all those things that I just mentioned. It's going to let them know that they have to do a health screen, the date and time of their health screen, that they have to do a temperature check. It's giving them informed consent and the opportunity for them to ask any questions. So I'll just kind of scroll down here for you to see. And the highlighted portions are portions where you, of course, then can insert things that are specific to that person that you're calling, the date and time of their screening. That would all be kind of pre-set up with them. And here I'm scrolling down further. And there you go, there's the end. So essentially that's a script, everybody, for you to read when you are calling the person to set up their appointment. And I'll flip back here to the PowerPoint. Then you've set the appointment, it's all set up to go. So you go back to your Outlook calendar as you would to schedule any meeting. And on these in-person appointments, it's important that you list the names of everybody participating. So maybe it's a participant, and if there's any other essential attendees there, and the location of the meeting. And really that's for contact tracing. If in the future we need to be doing that, then it's very clear who was there and where the meeting was. And that appointment somehow should just be flagged as an in-person meeting. So that's kind of up to you and what works for you. If you want to color code that meeting so it stands out to you, it's very noticeable on your calendar, or you have some other kind of abbreviation you want to put on that appointment name, that's up to you. But for the purpose of, if we ever need to go back and do contact tracing, you can quickly look at your calendar. You don't have to spend a lot of time trying to remember and figure out which of your appointments were in person and which were virtual. Then there's a note here at the bottom that visits will be canceled or rescheduled if proper safety protocols cannot be adhered to, or the participant or additional attendees do not provide consent, or if any meeting attendees have health concerns. So if there's anything that is, people aren't feeling well, they don't want to do all these things, they can be just canceled or just rescheduled to a time that works better. Okay, so we've set up the appointment, right? We've got approval. We have the date and time of our health screen, the date and time of our appointment. It's on our calendar. Now the day has arrived. The day is here for our in-person appointment. So just as you kind of already pre-set up, now it's time for us to call that participant at that scheduled time that we already had determined with them for their health screen / agreement to meet in person, which again is another form you're going to have access to in that Microsoft team. Okay, and what that includes, and I'll click on that here to show you, it's going to include a privacy notice and the health screen. So let's bring that up so you can take a peek at it. And this is what it's going to look like. And you can see mine is filled out a little bit already. So the name of the staff. So I just filled in my name, me, I'm meeting with somebody, and the initials of the person that I'm meeting with. The date of our scheduled visit. Yep, my supervisor has given approval for this and the date that they approved it. And now here is another script. So it says health screening script. And again, I'm not going to read this to you, but know that it includes the privacy notice. And then as we go down, it's the actual health screening that we, when we set up the appointment, told them was going to happen and that we were going to have to go through. So this is it. So again, you don't have to try to come up with what am I going to say? How is this going to work? It's all written out for you. You just read it. And as you go down, you can see that here starts that health screening. You're going to ask them questions such as, have you had a cough or shortness of breath or difficulty breathing in the last 72 hours? And you just answer yes or no according to what their answers are. And if at any point they say yes, like, yes, I have had cough and shortness of breath, it will change. And so you can see at the bottom, screening did not pass. If for whatever reason somebody that occurs and it says they did not pass the screen, you can reschedule your appointment, but no sooner than 7 days from this failed screening date. And it tells you that right on here. So let's change this all to no so we can see. Passed. Individuals was informed that their meeting can proceed as planned, and you would click submit. And then you're all done with that portion. Okay, so you set the appointment, the day was here, we opened that health screening, we read through it, which was their privacy notice. We asked them questions to actually do the health screen. They passed, we're good to go, the meeting is on. Then on your Outlook calendar, just as we've been doing for the last year and a half, the top of every day, you've got that appointment from MMB where you do your own health screen. If you're going to go into the office, where are you working? And it screens you, you would complete those daily health screenings. All right, so then you have your appointment, and after the appointment, did I skip? Oh, at the appointment, I knew I did. At the appointment, you may have with you, depending on the nature of your appointment. So keep in mind that we have some staff, I'll just call out John Bradyhoff, who does our assistive technology. There's equipment that he's touching, passing back and forth. The participant is trying and maybe using. So there are some personal protective equipment that may or may not be relevant to you in your role. So that's why it says they may have the following. So you may have the following equipment available to you, depending on your role and what you need. Things like masks and plus extras in case the participant doesn't have one. Hand sanitizer, non-latex gloves if you're handling equipment, aids, or devices, surface wipes, and Ziploc bags to dispose of some of those things, the gloves, the wipes, and the masks. At the appointment, wear a mask the entire time if you're not vaccinated. If you are fully vaccinated, you can still choose to wear a mask if you would like. Wash and sanitize your hands just prior to and after the appointment, and maintaining at least 6 feet of distance if required by the location. Now we're at after the appointment. So we set up the appointment, we had the appointment setting protocol, the day of. We called them for the health screen and the privacy notice. We had the appointment, and now it's after the appointment. It's pretty basic. Just place any or return any handled items into a separate bag, clean and sanitize them, of course, before returning. Dispose of any gloves, surface wipes, single-use masks, and throw them away. Wash and sanitize your hands, and then dispose of any cleaning materials or anything else, used PPE. So throughout that protocol, I use the words additional attendees. Like, for example, if a guardian needs to be there or whoever is, it's essential that they're at that same meeting. All additional attendees must go through the same thing. So they have to go through that appointment setting protocol. So you determine that, yes, guardian needs to be there. You need to call them and do the appointment setting protocol with them. Let them know that they have to have a health screen. And then the day of the appointment, you go through that whole health screen with them as well. So then think about your meetings with participants and really keep it limited to those that really only need to be there, to essential attendees for safety reasons, but also then, that saves you some time and not having to do all these separate protocols with every attendee. And then just kind of think about the space that you're going to be meeting in, that it should allow for social distancing if it's required by the location. So if it is required at the location that you're meeting and you've got 5 people coming, can you safely distance in that location? Does that make sense? So just some additional things to think about when you're meeting beyond just you and the participant. Okay. All right, I'm going to remind you that questions, you might have a few. We have that Microsoft form that we're taking questions in, and Jamie will throw that in the chat, and maybe she already has been this throughout this training. If you have questions, throw it in the Microsoft form and we can get to that. But we're not done yet. We're going to go through meeting with a third party with no participants there. And then we're going to do some COVID related. So maybe hold your questions and see if we can get through this. But if you've got a burning one and you just can't wait, you can throw it in that Microsoft form. So now we're shifting. We're shifting to meeting with a third party when the participant isn't there. So this might be, let's say you're going out and meeting a business for a tour of all the jobs that they've got available, and you're doing some networking there, just getting to know that employer, or you're going to a school and you're just meeting with staff, meeting the special ed department. But there are no participants at these meetings. So a lot of this is going to look similar, but with some things a little bit different. So again, upfront, determine that an in-person appointment is necessary. Do I really need to be in person at this appointment to see this employer, to meet this particular school staff, or can it be virtual? And you can kind of make that decision and then reach out to your manager for approval. Managers, in these cases, when the participant is not at these meetings, it is just with a third party. Then there is a form you fill out. It's called an in-person service request, and this is on Microsoft Teams. And I can't show you this, managers, because I don't have access to that team, though I do believe that most of you already, because you've had staff in phase 1 and phase 2, that you've already been doing this. And so reach out if you have questions about where that particular form is. But it's in Microsoft Teams. It's called an in-person service request. It's just a very simple form you fill out, who's requesting it, where are they going, and the date, and maybe a couple other information that you put in there. Then staff, then you're free to arrange for that in-person appointment. You've gotten the approval, you're ready to go, schedule that meeting and record, again, just as you would with the participant, on your Outlook calendar, the names of everybody who's going to be there and the location of the meeting. And again, somehow flag that appointment, whether it's a color code or some kind of system that works well for you to flag that as an in-person meeting, so that in the event we need to do contact tracing, you can quickly see on your calendar all those in-person meetings that you had. What you're going to notice that is not on this list is that health screen, that appointment setting protocol and the health screening. So those couple of extra steps that we took with participants, we don't do that with third party when the participant's not there. And the reason for that, they're not needed because staff employed at these third-party locations, they're already following their own business protocols. Businesses, they already, just as we do, they have their own protocols in place that they're following. So we do not need to health screen an employer. We do not need to health screen a school staff when we're going to their location to meet with them and the participant's not there. So the day of the appointment, we've made it. We're going to go out and see business A or school A. And so what we're going to do on the day of the appointment is complete our own daily health screenings. Again, just as we've been doing for like the last year and a half on your calendar, filling out that MMB health screening on your calendar. Wear a mask if you're not fully vaccinated, or if it's required by the business. It is possible that some of these businesses and community locations do require masking and social distancing on their own. So it's important to know where you're going and what requirements they have. And again, number 3, just to adhere to any COVID-19 precautions or protocols established that they've already got. And we might see more of those popping up now. Okay, so we're at the meeting now, okay, so some of you probably are wondering, what if I'm meeting at a third party, but with a participant, like job coaching, okay? Or at a school? Good question. And so you would follow both essentially. Follow the protocols for meeting with the participant and additional attendees. So you would still health screen, do the appointment setting protocols with the participant as you would, and any additional attendees that are going to be there. And then follow the safety protocols established by the third party. So you still wouldn't do the appointment setting protocol or the health screen, let's say with the business that you're visiting. Let's just for an example, use a job coaching situation at Target. You're going to Target, you wouldn't health screen the Target employees, but you still would go through all the steps of meeting with a participant and essential attendees. So you would still do the appointment setting protocol with the participant, maybe if their guardian is going to be there or a case manager, you still do all that and then follow the protocols in place by Target. And again, the health screenings aren't needed for the staff employed at the location because they're already following their own safety protocols. So it's a little bit of a blending of both. All right, we made it through the 2 protocols. Woohoo! Now just a few other important notes before we move on to our COVID safety training. Protecting medical data, this is very important. We are responsible for protecting participants' private medical data. No further information beyond what's recorded in the health screening tool should be documented or saved anywhere. So that does mean we do not put that kind of information in Workforce One or record it elsewhere. The only place to record that someone passed or didn't pass their health screen is in the health screen tool. I'll just bring that up as a reminder. It's this. This is the only place that we're able to document that. We want to make sure that we keep that private. So if you do have a situation, maybe where a person didn't pass the health screen for whatever reason, you don't put in your case notes that they failed the screen and you're rescheduling. Just a simple we're rescheduling is fine. So make sure that kind of information stays out of Workforce One. Reasonable accommodations. If a staff person has a reasonable accommodations not to wear a face covering, then they'll just won't be providing in-person services because at this time, in-person services are not a requirement. Excuse me, and staff providing in-person services must wear a face covering if you're not fully vaccinated. Though you still can choose to wear one if you are fully vaccinated. And our last slide here before I hand off to Brenda, again, is just a list of the supplies and PPE that may be provided to you. And so work with your manager to talk about your role and the types of supplies that you may need. You can use your own PPE as long as it meets standards that Brenda will review here in the next few slides. So again, have a conversation with your manager to say what you already have, Does it meet the standards of the types of supplies and PPE that we need to have, or do you need some? Do we need to provide you some? And on the slide now are some of the examples of things that may be useful for you and your role and the type of work that you're going to be doing. So washable face masks, including clear panel face masks, or disposable masks, hand sanitizer, non-latex gloves, Ziploc bags for disposing of PPE, and surface wipes. So managers kind of start thinking about the types of supplies and PPE that your staff maybe already have or you have in your office, and just start kind of thinking about where that may come from. Oh, thank you. All right, well, I am going to then pass it on to Brenda, who's going to walk us through some COVID safety training.
Thank you, Gretchen. Hello, everyone. We'll take the next slide and we'll look at some of the measures that we can put in place to help minimize the spread of COVID-19. Starting with the health screenings and making sure that you're staying home when you're not feeling well. Also, make sure you can social distance as much as possible. That means keeping 6-foot distance between yourself and others. Wearing a mask when required to do so, or if you prefer to, even if you're fully vaccinated. Avoid touching your face and ensure you wash your and sanitize your hands frequently. Clean and disinfect frequently touched shared surfaces and equipment, and ensuring proper ventilation. Next slide, please. So let's look a little bit at how COVID-19 is most commonly spread. It's most commonly spread through close distances when people sneeze or cough through their respiratory particles. It can also spread through airborne aerosolized particles, which is generally generated through like labored breathing, shouting, singing is more common ways. Increased risk factors include inadequate ventilation and the amount of time that you spend with the infected person, especially if they're not wearing a mask and if they haven't been fully vaccinated. Another way that's less common that it is spread is by touching surfaces that are infected with virus, and then touching your nose, mouth, and eyes. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about what defines close contact. It's according to the CDC, accumulation of 15 minutes spent within less than 6 feet of another person within a 24-hour period. So how do I avoid close contact when I'm providing in-person services? So when you're in a situation where you have to be closer than 6 feet, if you can just be mindful about not lingering there if you don't have to, maybe stepping back for periods of time when you don't need to be real close, and then coming forward, and then monitoring the amount of time that you're within that closer distance.
Yeah.
So it doesn't exceed 15 minutes. And try to keep talking to a minimum when you're in close contacts, and also try to avoid laughing or talking loudly, because that will help reduce the level of respiratory particles being expelled. Next slide, please. So when it comes to hand sanitation, you want to make sure you're being very thorough with that to kill the germs. So you want to go through all the steps: wet, lather, scrub, rinse, dry. They all play a role. Even the drying process, the friction helps kill virus. So try to do that for 20 seconds. And again, avoid touching your nose, mouth, and eyes. Use hand sanitizer when hand washing is not possible. Make sure that the product you're using is at least 60% alcohol, and be real generous in applying the gel. Rub your hands together on all surfaces, the fingers and behind the hands, and make sure that you're doing that for at least 20 seconds as you would for washing your hands. Next slide, please. So face coverings, they help protect those around us from the infectious agents that we expel when we're coughing and sneezing and speaking, but also wearing the face covering can help protect you from the other person. Customers may not be able to wear a face covering for medical reasons. And you might consider whether or not in-person service delivery still can be safely provided in those situations. Next slide, please. So wear your face covering at all times if required by the business or if you're not fully vaccinated. Wash your hands and use the hand sanitizer before you put your mask on, and make sure you have the mask covering both your nose and mouth and that it's secured under your chin. Make sure it's fitting snugly to your face. Make sure the loops are either over your ears or tied behind your head snugly. And if you need to continually be adjusting your mask, it probably isn't fitting properly and you try to find a different brand. And make sure that you can breathe easily with the mask. If you're not able to breathe easily, you should probably try a different type of mask. Next slide, please. Some of the do's for wearing your mask. You want to make sure you keep a spare mask to replace it in case it becomes wet from moisture or just your breathing, because they become less effective in those cases. And then store the wet reusable mask in a plastic bag until they can be washed or disposed, and then dispose of any paper masks. Make sure you handle the mask by the ear loops or the ties in order to avoid infecting the surface of the mask. In order to, when you take them off, fold the outside corners together to store them. And things you shouldn't do is wear the mask around your neck or your forehead, and then touching the mask, the face of the mask, or if you do touch the surface of the mask, you should wash your hands or use sanitizer afterwards. Next slide, please. So we should be sure we're cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched or shared equipment and surfaces. First, you want to clean any dirty surfaces with soap and water to remove the residue so that the disinfectant that you would use afterwards can do its job. Be sure you're wiping down the full surface of the object. And keep in mind that there are some products, such as peroxide-based products, that require you to leave the surface wet for a while afterwards before drying. So you want to read the product labels for that. And alcohol-based products work best for electronics because they dry quickly. So you want to keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So you want to make sure you're using chemical disinfectant safely. So always make sure you read the directions and follow those directions. We don't recommend any of the products that would require MSDS sheets, but if that is the case, you want to make sure you are reviewing those MSDS, which is basically a safety data sheet, to make sure you're following the instructions in those sheets. You want to wear disposable gloves to avoid irritation from the products. The products that we recommend don't require that you wear disposable gloves, but it helps avoid irritation. You want to wash your hands after you remove the gloves. And also, if you don't aren't able to wear gloves, you should try to wash your hands immediately after. Ensure adequate ventilation, such as opening windows if you're going to be using the product, more than just a minor disinfection. If you're doing a lot of cleaning, you want to think about the ventilation, certainly. And then never mix products or chemicals because it can cause a dangerous chemical reaction. And be thinking about when you're using those products, the people that might be in the area, if they could possibly have asthma or have some allergies that could trigger a bad reaction. So keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So ways you can improve ventilation when the weather permits. You can increase the fresh outdoor air by opening windows and doors. You can use fans to increase the effectiveness of the open windows, but make sure that you're facing the fan so it's blowing or drawing the air out instead of drawing it in and spreading germs around. If you're working in a kitchen area that has exhaust fans and that's available, you can use that to help improve the ventilation. And also using a HEPA filtration air purifier can be helpful at cleaning the air. Next slide, please. So that's all I have for you. So if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome.
Again, a reminder, if you have questions, submit them in that Microsoft form. Jamie Kraft has been plugging that into the chat, I think, a number of times here. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody. Okay, I think some of you might be typing, so I'll take a peek at some of these questions. Okay. Okay, here's a question. So question number one, this is a specific one for specific counties, Scott and Carver County. So this might be relevant to others though, who do these resource fairs, and we're a part of those. They want to have VR have a table again this year. We may come in contact with about 200 to 300 people throughout a 6-hour fair. Can we attend such event?
Brent, I guess I'm not aware of anything saying we can't, but Brenda, I'm kind of looking to you to see if there's any deed-wide guidance. I'm not sure to the answer. We might have to check further, but I'm not aware of any requirements saying we're not able to do that at this time.
Yeah, this is Brenda. I'm not either, but I don't want to give a for sure answer to that unless we check it out first. So I think it would be best if we did that, especially with what's going on now in different areas. There are increases in the COVID cases. So we want to keep a close eye on that.
All right, thank you. Next question. They are recommending masks again because of the Delta variant, regardless of vaccination status. Is this something that we will follow as well?
At this time, according to MMB, it's not a requirement. That could change, but for right now, fully vaccinated individuals are not required to wear masks when at the work site or wherever that may be, unless it's required by the non-operated or state-operated place that you'll be working at.
Next question. This is a good one. What about in-person trainings? Has there been any discussions about the upcoming MRA conference in late September? Do we know if staff will be able to attend or not?
Would you like me to answer that from the safety standpoint?
Yeah, why don't you?
Yeah, I think it's too soon to know for sure where we're going to be at that time and whether things will improve in terms of COVID or get worse. So we'll have to kind of play it by ear at this time.
Thank you, Brenda. A couple questions about how long will phase 3 last?
You know, I mean, I would say until further notice. Again, like we were originally when we were setting up the phases and making proposals, we were hoping things would open up after Labor Day. I just don't know at this point. So until further notice.
If we get invited to a meeting at a high school and we're told that there would just be a couple people there, and we get to the meeting and there's like 6 or 7, would we need to leave?
Again, from a safety standpoint, I don't think that we would be requiring them to leave if there were 6 or 7 participants there.
Okay. Oh, and they're moving on me here, so let me find where I was. When providing services to groups, and that has pre-eps in parentheses, as we limited to 15 total participants per week, or is it a group considered, or is a group considered one meeting? So I think what they're asking is the limitation of 15 per week meetings or the number of people involved in the meetings?
I don't know if that's a safety question or not. I don't exactly know where that criteria came from. So I'm not sure
Yeah.
who would be best to answer that.
So that was criteria we initially set up and was approved by deed. I don't know that I know the answer to that exactly. I think overall, I would just say we want to be mindful. Like if you're meeting frequently with large groups of people, like just be mindful of that. Again, we're trying to mitigate the number of potential exposures and people that you're going to be with at this point. I would just be mindful of that. I don't, Gretchen, any other thing else? from
Well,
your
I just
understanding?
referenced back the PowerPoint, and that particular slide where it talks about I think it's a copy and paste from the plan. It talks about appointments. So it doesn't say per person, it just says limited to the number of appointments. And it doesn't say anything about the number of people per appointment. A question about, these keep moving on me. This is interesting. Okay, how long will these forms be required?
Until further notice. I do not know. At least until Labor Day, at a
Okay.
minimum.
Okay, I'm just looking here. Some of these are similar. How do we call students while they are in class? Oh, God dang it. They aren't allowed to have their phones. Do we have to do health screenings with case managers? Office staff we talk to when we, or office staff we talk to when we get to school. So that's talking about day of the appointment, we have to do a health screening with the participant. And if the participant is a student in class, how do we do that health screen with them when they don't have their phone on them, for example, to be able to take that screen?
You know, I'm not sure. I mean, my assumption is that the school is doing these same health screenings, you know, before students are coming into class. So, I mean, it may be that you're going to have to, that you could, I don't know. I'm not certain.
Hey Dee, sorry, that was my question. And the schools, like I'm getting the protocols from my schools and like, at least I know at least one of my schools right now is doing, before you can even send kids to school that day, you have to fill that out. So I just worry that I'm not going to get to find any of my students if they have to answer the phone during the day.
Yeah, no, it's a
And
good question. And yeah,
it is a good question to think through. And it just might be that situation where when you're setting up the appointment using this appointment setting protocol, you're already sort of pre-deciding when that phone screen is going to be. And so my guess is, like with anybody, it's in a conversation is when are you available that day prior to your appointment? So it might be a call before they go to school or when they're on break or whenever they're available. Each person might be a little bit different, because it could be somebody else who's not a student who also has some things going on that day that they're unavailable. So we just need to work that call around. It doesn't say it has to be immediately before, it just is that same day to be able to do that health screen. So it just might be doing it prior. Okay, so let me scroll down. Is there a list? Sorry, you guys, the form keeps moving on me when I get to the spot where I'm trying to read. Is there a form for those who are quote unquote COVID long haulers where they may fail the screening but aren't technically contagious, specifically thinking short of breath?
I think that would have to be, I have to think about that. I guess the question that's asked with the health screenings that I've been familiar with is this a normal thing for you? So I can't remember in the healthcare screening that you're using, does it say anything about these symptoms not being normal for you? So if it's a long hauler, if it's a lingering thing, that shouldn't prevent somebody from passing the screening.
Yeah, I think some of the questions say within the, last number of days, but I think that's an important clarifying point. Like, as a person who lives with asthma, I'm coughing all the time. So
Yeah.
so if I'm answering those questions, I'm answering it, is it out of what kind of my normal everyday life looks like? Is it more than that? Is a
Yeah.
good way, I think, to guide people in answering them.
Yeah.
Mhm. Is the screening call prior to the appointment something techs can do, or do you want counselors to be doing them all?
I would say talk to your manager about that and figure that out within your team. I don't think we have a requirement that counselors absolutely have to do that. I think if your techs could call the participant and do the health screening, um, it's okay from my standpoint. I would just work that out with your manager and your team, what works best.
Okay. Is there anyone exempt from the screening? Thinking about county workers or those who work for MSOCs or even community providers. They may be essential attendees, but do we have to do the screening with them?
So we're talking about somebody that's going to be there at the appointment and within possibly close proximity. Yeah,
Yes.
then that is what we've, I guess, as a part of a plan, is that they would need to be screened as well.
Okay. I am a person who struggles with multiple environmental allergies and asthma. If I answer those questions honestly each time, I may always be put into COVID-19 protocols. How do I respond?
Again, if it's a part of your normal, what's normal for you, then you shouldn't answer that as in a positive way. You shouldn't be saying yes, that you're having those symptoms if you know it's not related to COVID.
Mhm. There's a couple other questions very similar to that. I'm going to read it just to make sure it's kind of along the same lines, and maybe you don't have a different answer, Brenda. But per the COVID health screening questions, what if someone has a disability that results in a cough or shortness of breath, but is not COVID? Answering truthfully will result in a no, yet the person shouldn't lie. Any wiggle room for these cases? So it feels like
Yeah.
it's a similar.
Yeah, again, if it's something that's normal for them that doesn't appear to be out of the norm, that could be COVID related, then they shouldn't need to answer yes to that question.
Okay. Actually, there's kind of a number of questions that are related to that. So I'm going to scroll down. That sort of a thing. If somebody has allergies and they're coughing and sneezing, but it's not COVID. So
yeah.
Of course, right now with the air quality and the Canadian fires, that might be causing some more issues in some folks who are sensitive.
I think the bigger thing is if they have a fever, if they're a person who generally has those symptoms, but then they also have a fever or a really, really persistent cough. Or, usually people, I think, know when something is going beyond their norm.
Yeah. Clarifying question. So if one of the 5 people do not respond to the health screening, can the meeting not happen? Is it possible to have the meeting without the one person that didn't respond?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah. So if one person, let's say they're inviting 5 people to the meeting and one of those people don't respond to the health screening, does the whole meeting need to be canceled, or is it still possible to have the meeting without that one person that didn't do the health screen?
I'm just going to, I'd leave that to your judgment. That's going to depend on the situation and who that person is and are they critical to the meeting. So I would say use your own judgment for that.
Okay. Next question. If a person has 2 co-guardians, can you read the appointment setting protocol to all 3 of them at the same time? So the participant and then the co-guardians, like on speakerphone, for example.
I see Jamie nodding her head and she helped us with the policies. Yes.
Oops, moved on me again. I don't know what this question, I'll read it. And then Protocols for attending a meeting at a CRP location or community meeting with or without a participant. That's a question. So I think they're just maybe wondering, protocols for attending a meeting at a CRP or community meeting without a participant. With or without a participant. So if you're meeting at a community rehab provider or a community meeting without a participant, you would follow the protocols with the third party, where you still need to determine it's necessary, ask for supervisory approval, and then follow their protocols. If the participant is present at that community meeting, at a community partner, for example, you would do the appointment setting protocol, the health screen with the participant and any of their essential attendees, and then follow the business protocols that they have in place wherever it is that you're meeting at the location. I hope that answers your question. If not, maybe you can plug another one in there. As a VR tech in the field, meeting clients at a store to pay for some items or to sign something is a common need. Does the health screening protocols apply if I am meeting someone at Walmart or other locations for this purpose?
Yes. Right.
Go ahead.
Yes.
So yes, the simple answer is yes. And then the follow-up question to that is, do I obtain a manager approval prior to meeting a participant to pay for clothing and store and sign a document? And manager approval is part of the protocol, so I would imagine the answer is still yes.
And I just want to give a little more context around that. We're really just, again, what that manager approval looks like, work that out with your own manager. Different managers may have a different, ways that they want that to be communicated. Like I may, for instance, just want people to, as long as it's on your Outlook calendar and I can go back and check and there's a record of it, I may be good. That may be how you notify me. Other managers may want you to call them or to text them or send an email. Like work that out with your manager, what that approval looks like and what works best for them.
And on the backside, Dee, are you still reporting to the commissioner's office the numbers of our in-person appointments? So
yeah, the numbers of appointments, and then if there's anything wonky or anything happens or there is a COVID related incident, like we have to report all of that weekly. So that's why we just need to really have tabs on what's happening in the field. Yeah.
And so I think you're pulling that information from when from the health screen. There's information there that's being documented that you can pull who's meeting with who and with participants. And then on the flip side, if we're meeting, like, let's say with a business, the form that managers complete to say that they've approved this in the Microsoft team, that's also a tracking for Dee's sake and for the commissioner's office sake. So we're just tracking all the appointments that are happening, and that's just the way that they're being tracked. I have to scroll back down here on my list of questions. If we are meeting with a participant and a job coach, does the job coach need to do the health screen?
Yeah, they're participating in that meeting. So yes, they would have to still do the health screen.
So until further notice, are you saying that anytime staff go into the schools to meet with students, they need supervisory approval beforehand?
Yeah, again, we want to have a way of knowing where you're at, when you're going there, kind of what schools you're at. So what that supervisory approval looks like, just work that out with your supervisor. If they're okay with you having all the details on Outlook, that may be fine. But if they want another way of tracking that, for instance, email or phone calls, work that out with them.
For non-client meetings, can this include the IPS? Oh, and it just jumped on me. The IPS team meetings. Scrolling down. I'm sorry, guys. The IPS team meetings with social workers and mental health providers when they are meeting in person. No clients come to these. These are case review meetings. Yes, I would think that that's a great example of other types of sort of non-participant meetings. There's lots of different variety in those, and those you would follow the protocols for the third party, where you still determine it's necessary, get supervisory approval, and follow the protocols that the location has in place, if that's masking or social distancing or any other kinds of safety protocols. Okay, we're getting down to the bottom of our questions here. If we are meeting with youth participants at schools, of course, in parentheses, it says when school starts and if we're allowed in, will we need to do health screening with them at that time? Assuming schools will have some sort of protocols as well in order for them to attend school in person. Yes.
I think that was similar to an earlier
Yeah.
question, but yeah, we would like
Yeah.
you to do that, even if you may be doubling up on that for students. You know, maybe they have to do that in the morning before they go to school, but if you could run through it, I think quickly before you meet with them, that'd be good too.
Yeah. Okay, a few more here. Ooh. I think it jumps on me when another question gets plugged in there. Is each office location responsible for ordering their own PPE? Yes. And it's possible that some staff may have their own PPE that they're already using, as long as it meets sort of those guidelines that Brenda walked through. Again, her part of the PowerPoint will be available to you at the conclusion of this. We'll make sure that you can read all those slides that Brenda walked through. Then they can use their own, or there might be some staff who don't have what's recommended, and then you can work together to get those ordered for your team. How do managers ensure proper ventilation in the offices?
Just going back to the start of the pandemic, there was guidelines that were provided from the Department of Administration, Real Estate and Construction Services to all landlords that they were to follow for increasing ventilation. I did send out a survey several months ago to all site managers, asking them to indicate whether or not there were any concerns with ventilation at their locations, and there was nothing that came up. So unless there is a concern of a staff person that believes that they're not having adequate ventilation in rooms that they'll be meeting in or working in, then we're just assuming that, you know, that there is adequate ventilation at our locations at this time.
Thank you, Brenda.
And
I
Brenda,
should mention, if you're meeting out in the field though in a person's home, I did provide some of the guidelines I would recommend. Go ahead, Dee.
that's exactly what I was going to say. You had some nice recommendations in that one slide about around ventilation. So I would think people could apply that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can a face shield be used instead of a mask?
Face shields, if you're required to wear a mask, face shields are not, they're not considered the same as a mask. They don't provide the same effectiveness. So I would have to say no to that.
If a meeting will not meet the close contact definition, do the same requirements need to be followed? For example, if a client needs a uniform to start a job tomorrow and VR staff only need to go into the store, pay for the clothes that the client's already picked out and leave, max of 5 minutes.
I'm not following that question. So can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Certainly.
Well, I think it's so, Brenda, we have sometimes our VR techs go into stores and purchase things for people, but they're not meeting with a participant. So, I mean, I guess in that case, we'd follow the, you know, because you're going to be in contact with people in a business. I would think you'd follow with the, just making sure you're doing your health check before you go in, and on site, you know, you're still going to be in a business and having contact with folks. So we'd follow that protocol, I think, is what we would do.
Yeah, we follow the store's protocol,
Right.
But there wouldn't need to be, if they're asking whether there need to be a health screening for people that they may come in contact with, doesn't sound like they're meeting with anybody. So yeah, and it's a brief period of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Will PPE be required at home for those working from home and in the office?
Oh,
And yeah, will PPE be required at home for those working from home and in the office?
so will people be meeting with customers at home too? I'm
No,
not-
no, we are
Okay.
not. And so, no,
Yeah,
you,
no,
if you
no.
want to have stuff at home, buy your own stuff for home. We're
Yeah.
not supplying it at home either. So the answer is no, not required
true.
at home.
Okay, and then there was another question about, is in-person services required?
Nope, we talked about that early in the introductory piece of it.
Mhm.
So it is not required at this time. It is optional. I would say though, just to be mindful of, like, if you have somebody, I know some people have folks who are on hold because they really need in-person services, or they're on hold because they prefer in-person services. Like, if you're not ready for whatever reason to do some in-person services yourself right now, please work that out with your manager. Like, if you have somebody needing that, maybe you can, I don't know, swap some cases or something so you can do some more remote things. So it's not required right now, and we'll see what comes after Labor Day. I know that we're hoping after Labor Day, we would fully move into services. And, at that time, once things are fully opened up, there will be a point in time where we're going to be required to meet with people in person again. It could be after Labor Day, but again, we'll have to see. We'll see how things go.
Okay, more questions came in here, and I do apologize. We have these in the form, so if we skip some, it doesn't look like it's keeping them in any kind of order for me. So I'm trying to go in order, but it looks like they're kind of mixing in here. So let's see, I'm going to scroll back down. What do we do if a participant refuses to wear a mask or shows up without one?
I'm just wondering, if the participant says that they have not been fully vaccinated, then I would say we wouldn't provide services. If they have been fully vaccinated, I don't believe it's a requirement, and we can't ask them whether they've been vaccinated. So if they don't wear a mask and they haven't volunteered that, we can't require them to wear a mask. I mean, I think that's the way the plan is set up right now. Is that accurate?
Yep. Unless there's requirements at whatever place whatever business or location you're meeting at, if that establishment requires mask wearing and the person's not wearing a mask, then you probably don't want to go through with the meeting. We obviously want to follow our local, whatever the practice is at the site that you're meeting at.
Yeah, and the customer does, from what I understand, still need to wear a mask if they are not fully vaccinated, if they say they're not fully vaccinated. And so in that case, I would recommend not holding the meeting if there needs to be close proximity. I can't, maybe we need to look at this further, because if the employee themselves has been fully vaccinated, would that still be okay for them to meet with them, even though they say they haven't been fully vaccinated and they're not wearing a mask? So I think we need to have a little bit more discussion on that, unless one of you have a good answer for that scenario.
Okay. Let's see here. A question about how this process works in relation to IEP meetings, which are at school, with a student and staff being in a building that has its own safety protocols. What steps do we take and not take in relation to our process? I think it's the same. I think you would still do your health screen appointment setting protocol with the participant and additional attendees. And then I would guess that school staff would be the staff that are employed at that school. They don't need to be health screened. They aren't considered additional attendees there, but you would still follow the protocols that they have in place, that the school has in place. There are outside guests coming that are your additional attendees, like the guardian, whoever, they would need to be health screened.
Gretchen, can I follow up with that? That's my question. So how do we even track all that? Do you know what I mean? Like the IEP meeting is not my meeting that I'm setting up. I'm a guest at that meeting. And so how do we track all the outside attendees, whether it's a counselor from Washburn coming in or guardians, or, you know, they obviously will know if a guardian's there, but how do we track who's all coming there and who I'm health screening beforehand? And I may not even have their contact information. I might not have even consent to speak with them in relation to that individual. How do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
This sounds more like you're attending a meeting. It's not a meeting that you're establishing. Is that
I'm the guest.
Yeah.
I'm the guest. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of goes along with any types of meetings employees are going to, you know, if they're meeting with groups at this time. I don't know that there's any MMB requirement saying that we can't go to any in-person meetings at this time. So I think you just have to use your best judgment, especially if you're not fully vaccinated, if you're going to be in a group and you're unfamiliar with whether or not people in that room have been fully vaccinated. So I guess I wish I had a really, you know, concrete answer for that, but I don't know at this time.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make sure I'm following, like if I do attend an in-person IEP meeting when the time comes, I just want to make sure I'm following the process that's expected of me. And I guess it gets a little confusing to me when it's an IEP meeting that's being conducted by the school. I'm a guest, and there's a lot of attendees that come in and out of that meeting. Some school staff, some outside people, parents. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, I've had meetings where it's 15 to 20 people sometimes. And, you know, granted, it might look different, right? Because of COVID, maybe they'll still hold them virtually. I guess I'm just preparing for possibilities.
Yeah, Megan, I mean, I'd be surprised, frankly, if schools are doing in-person IEP meetings, but I want to know about that. Like if that's starting to happen, I just kind of like a heads up so we can think about it. But I agree with Brenda, like we don't have anything saying we can't. I mean, teams can get together, you can have in-person meetings, everybody's comfortable, and we can attend as guests in-person meetings if we're comfortable doing that. So, but I think it's just something for us to kind of keep tabs on and keep our eyes on and monitor. So again, I'd be interested in hearing when and if schools start having in-person IEP meetings. My guess is they're going to keep them virtual for a while, but we'll see.
Thank you, Megan. Brenda, I think this is for you. It's could you review the position of the fan if an open window isn't an option? And there's a follow-up question to that.
I would say if there isn't an open window, it's probably best not to use the fan because it's just going to circulate, you know, the particles that are already in the air instead of drawing it away. Fans can be used to improve ventilation if you can use an open window. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. And then the follow-up question to that is, will HEPA portable fans be available for employees that request one?
That would be a question for Dee, I think.
Sorry, I missed it.
Yeah.
I was distracted trying to, I was trying to read comments and I can't keep up or answer all those questions. So if others can flag those. So can you repeat it, Gretchen?
Yeah. Oh, and it just jumped on me too. It is, let me just find it again. Will HEPA portable fans be available for employees that request one?
The air purifiers is, I think, what they're referring to.
Oh gosh.
You know, I was thinking more in terms of you go somewhere where the owner has a HEPA filtration system available, because I was thinking more work in people's homes, that if they have that, having that in the area is helpful. But yeah, and then in the office, they can be helpful, but
they can be helpful. Typically we've only purchased those for an accommodation request. So I just like that would be really expensive. We had to buy everybody HEPA filter fans. So I would say we would continue as we have. If it's an accommodation request, we would.
Yeah, my recommendation is if they're available to use them, and like Dee said, if it seems more necessary for reasonable accommodation.
This is Chris McVeigh. I would also suggest like around those IEPs and meetings where you know that you're getting invited, where there are multiple people that are going to be there, as much as possible to do a reach out to that teacher or that case manager at the school and ask about, you know, what are their plans for IEPs this year? How will that be accommodated? And knowing that you, I mean, as DEED employees, we as DEED employees have certain things that we need to be mindful of. Maybe there's a conversation that can occur, information that you have about how your schools are going to handle IEPs, but also maybe some thoughtful planning that the teachers or case managers can consider as they're thinking about having groups of people come to those IEPs. I think a lot of the chat is about, you know, that IEPs that are happening in this fall with some students in certain schools where they're in person. That's where I think that your relationship with the school staff, your awareness of how that school is going to be hosting meetings or holding meetings will be so important, and definitely check in with your manager about those. I think that's as much as you can do that upfront before these meetings start getting held, to just be thinking about how you can make it work for you and that it fits within our protocol with DEED.
Thank you, Chris. And everyone's video on mine is frozen, so I just want to verify that you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, we
Someone
can,
else- yeah,
Gretchen.
you can. Thank you. Thank you. I can't see you. Give me a thumbs up. A question about if we can ask people to bring their vaccine cards that verifies they received both doses of the vaccine.
No, because we are not able to ask either employees or customers whether or not they've been vaccinated.
Scrolling down here. How do you handle when a participant comes into the Career Force Center and the receptionist asks for a VR staff to come up to the front to talk with the participant or a potential participant? How do you handle when a participant or a potential participant comes into the Career Force Center and asks the receptionist to talk to VR staff?
As far as I know, we're doing by appointment only, and the Career Force Center is as well. So my assumption is they're going to ask that person to schedule an appointment. But again, I mean, it could look different in different locations. So I would ask that you work with your manager in your specific location to figure out that scenario, or who they would call at the front desk, and make sure that is smooth and people are getting their questions answered. So it could look different in different locations. But as far as I know, the Career Force locations and ourselves are by appointment only.
At schools, we often meet with people spontaneously and or run into a student not scheduled and may meet in several rooms. How do we handle this?
Okay.
I don't think. Go ahead, Brenda. If you know the answer, I don't think I caught all that.
No,
but-
I didn't catch the beginning of it. My mind was still kind of thinking on the last question at the
Sure.
beginning. I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. At schools, we often meet with people spontaneously or run into a student that wasn't scheduled, and we may also meet in several rooms. How will we handle this?
I think at this time, you know, the in-person meetings still need to follow those requirements. That's just my take on it. I don't know. Dee?
Yep. Yep. I think that's the best way to answer that. I don't know that I.
Yeah. You know, at the beginning, we said that we talked about that these are by appointment only right now. So the spontaneous walking around the school, if those were because you had specific appointments set up, that hopefully is less likely to happen because it's by appointment only, which is sometimes different, at least right now, how we sometimes go see our students in the schools. So maybe that helps answer that question. If a VR staff has a condition such as a medical diagnosis or pregnancy, are we allowed to require our participants and their teams to still wear a mask?
Again, we can't require the customer to wear a mask unless they have said that they are not fully vaccinated, and we can't ask that question. So if there is a concern, I would say you just wouldn't provide in-person service delivery if those situations arise, as long as it's not mandatory at this time.
Thank you, Brenda. And there was a question just down after that, just confirming that right now it sounds like we should only be making in-person appointments if it's necessary. Am I understanding that right? Yes.
That's correct.
Question about how many phases are there? So we're in phase 3. So how many are there total?
Well, right now there are 4 phases with basically, phase 4 would be going back to our new normal without all of the requirements. So as we've said, this is what phase 3 looks like. And, you know, there's still some questions we need to answer. So Brenda and I'll see if there's any further guidance from DEED or MMB about, you know, attending in-person conferences or large outside in-person meetings, because I'm not aware of any. There's no restrictions that we're aware of right now, but again, we want to keep tabs on that. So there could be more information and things that change along the way. So this is where we're at now, and if we get more clarification on any of those things, we will roll that out to everyone as quickly as possible.
Okay, we have a lot more questions. I'm seeing that there's more here, and we've got just a couple minutes before the end, but we do have all these saved. So we will make sure that we look at all these questions that are coming in. Some are similar in nature, and we will get those answered for you, but I'll keep reading until time expires here in the next couple minutes. Let me scroll down here to my next question. And it just jumped. Of course it did. Do we know when career force centers will start opening up again? Can we still see clients in our office if they are not open to the public?
So I'll start, Brenda, and you can help me. So my understanding is that some of the local county career force centers have already opened. They've been open for a while and they've been seeing people by appointment only. My understanding is that August 2nd, the DEED career force locations will be open, and again by appointment only. There was a second part of that I forgot. But
I did too.
Can we still see clients in our office if they are not open to the public?
Oh, got it. Yeah, yes, you can. Yep. Again, be mindful of typical safety kinds of things. Talk to your manager about that. I mean, and I'm talking like if you're the only one in the office, that makes me a little nervous, unless that's how it typically is in your office if you're, you know, a one person location. But talk to your manager about that, just so we have so you have your general kind of safety protocols for your office in place.
We have a couple of questions similar in nature, asking that some of their high schools do screenings daily prior to the students arriving at school. So do we still need to do our own screening?
Yeah, I think we did answer that question already. So, yep.
Let's see.
And
I
just need to let you know there's another meeting that I absolutely have to be on at the beginning of that starts now. So
it starts right now. It just clicked over to 10:30. So we are at our ending time. We do have all your responses though recorded here, your questions. So we've got those. That link will be there. So maybe in the next couple minutes, if you have one that you want to add to that question form, please do. I know I didn't read all of them. There's a large number that I can see are in there. We got through about half of them. So thank you everybody for attending today. It was good to connect with you all, and have a wonderful Thursday.
Thanks everyone. Thank you, Brenda. I would just say too,